Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Spiritside Chats. So excited to join you all today and open up this call on this lovely, lovely Easter weekend. Blue moon, no less, on Easter. That's really exciting. So the topic and the theme today is the renewal process and death and rebirth and all that comes along with that, as we're probably mostly very familiar with that classic story, Christ and his death and resurrection, which took place on this time, or is said to have. It's what we celebrate anyways. And all of that represents too, right? Because we can get into all that stuff with like the equinox and the pagan rituals and all of that stuff. And I'm certain we will. But to start, as we always do, let us begin a meditation. I feel compelled to ask if anybody wants to join or if anybody wants to lead one, but I also remember Eddie just being like, you do it. So there's Aaron. All right, let's do this. Take a deep breath. And then take another. Smile. Because why not? This is the age of prophecy, of miracles and telepathy. The revelation of the mysteries, that I am you and you are me. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Shanti Om. Continue your breath and feel into your heart, the place that cannot die, while everything around it swirls through the death and rebirth process. Everything is constantly in a state of being born again, renewed, decaying, dying, and being born once more. Every cell in your body, every molecule eventually breaks down to become an ingredient for another. Sometimes they are a reflection of the same thing that they were before. And sometimes they are something entirely new. Breathe. Breathe. Every breath is a renewal. Every exhale, a release. And the more in flow that this is, every breath you take, the more smooth the wave is between inhales and exhales. The more harmonious your own spiritual and conscious growth and evolution becomes. Because you tune yourself to the natural rhythm of nature. Like the tree who buds in the spring, flourishes in the summer, dies in the fall, and enters stasis for the winter. It's not actually dying, it's just changing its form. And so you too go through these same cycles. Peace. Peace on earth. Peace in your body. Peace in your mind. And peace in your heart. Namaste.
I'm so glad you're the one who did that today, because if I would have sung, it would have been terrible.
Well, I was noticing my own off-keyness during that second part, but
you were the only one. You were the only one. It sounded great.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful.
Thank you, guys. Oh, what a beautiful day it is today. It's like the sun is relatively out, kind of cloudy, but there's just like a sense of family and peace that I think is happening, at least where we are, you know. I mean, there's a lot of different things happening in the world, but it's happening here too. This is really nice. So let's open this up. You know, I feel like I'm the only one talking. I would love to hear from you guys about what comes to your mind when you think and know within with the death and renewal process.
I wouldn't mind actually jumping out here and talking a little bit about something that I've kind of discovered and thought about, and then I want to end it with a question for you guys, because I think you have even more insight and knowing than I do about this topic. But to start off, I would say that, you know, death is a very important thing that happens here on this planet. And I've often talked to people over and over again who have a lot of fear. And of course, fear and death go hand in hand. Fear is our #1 survival emotion. So it's always been a huge topic of conversation. And what's kind of amazing, though, about death and the fear of death is that it's an opportunity to have both negative and positive emotions. If we were unable to die, if we were infinite, then I think it would be very difficult to discern between a positive and negative emotion. They're kind of not necessary almost. And so we can thank the fact that we do die to that, you know, hey, we get to have these things. And so that's one of the angles that I take when I'm working with people who have a lot of fear, is that fear is not necessarily a bad thing. And if we look at the infinite nothingness that maybe we could experience infinite nothingness, where nothing happens, nothing new, no surprises, no death, no rebirth. We just exist in the infinite now with nothing going on. You know, that sounds kind of boring. But actually what we get to do, and it's kind of amazing what we get to do, is we get to come to this planet and we get to see what it feels like to have amazing good things happen. So if we were kind of going to draw a graph, right down the middle here would be infinite nothingness. But if we take and we expand from that graph and we go this way and we say that this is amazing, positive, beauty, and fantastic things that can happen to us. And then we take on this side of the graph, horrible, miserable, terrible things that can happen to us, cancer and the Holocaust and awful things. What we find is that they are both equidistant from absolute nothingness and absolute, you know, infinite nothingness. And so they are both amazing because they are still experiences. They are still things that we get to have happen to us. And so, you know, when we suffer, then we think that this is bad, but this is just the perspective of the individual. From someone like Source, who's looking at this like this is infinite nothingness and these things are amazing, they're both equidistant from nothingness. So there's something to celebrate about good things and bad things that happen to you. If it weren't for death, I don't believe those things would happen at all. And so my question to you guys is, I feel like Earth is very special in this way. And maybe it's just its three-dimensionality, but I wonder how much death happens outside of Earth I know our experience obviously is only right here, but you guys have knowingness. I know it. I have knowingness that you have knowingness, and that you probably have a very interesting perspective on, you know, do the Palladians die? Do any of the other extra dimensional and extraterrestrial beings experience that, or is that what's really special about Earth? It could be an interesting concept.
I'd chime in that everything changes. What's an ending for one is a beginning for the next. So whether they end in the way that we look at it or not, maybe not. Maybe they end in the way that the caterpillar ends and the butterfly begins. I don't know. But I know that change is the law of life, and so if you live, you change.
I might propose that for other species, you know, and of alien life, whether in this dimension or others, that they might experience death in maybe a different way, or at least without the fear, or maybe with more awareness of what's happening. You know, for them, maybe it's not, or, you know, I mean, there's probably, I mean, I'm certain infinite numbers of different the different species. So some might be more similar to us, where they don't know, and it's like the scary thing, and actually physically dying is like terrifying. And for other species with a higher level of awareness or a higher dimensional frequency or resonance, maybe there's a sort of a consciously leaving your body, being like, oh, right, I'm good now. And then just boop, and they pop out, and everyone's like, oh yeah, there he goes, you know, and watching the spirit. And there's no like, oh no, Bob died, you know, because they're like, hey, there goes Bob. All right, what do we do with his body? Well, he always wanted it to, you know, like be, you know, cremated or buried or this or that, or thrown into the sun, you know, whatever it is. So I'm certain that it varies in that way. That's my immediate reflection, anyways, Kevin, to what you brought up, and Joshua, your response too.
Yeah, I mean, from my personal meditations and reflections and what I've learned through a lot of the processes that I went through with Mahajriya, the primary concept that comes to mind is really like the cyclical nature of these experiences. And I can start with the full lifetime cycle from birth to death, or I could like break that down into a year cycle or a month cycle or even a day cycle. But you have sort of this beginning and this opportunity to go have an experience. And then you have sort of like that nighttime or that rest and reflection cycle back that allows you to reflect on your experiences, to kind of go deep and to learn something from it, and then jump into the next cycle, the next day, the next week, the next iteration, the next lifetime. And so when I look at that, the teachings that I was, or that I've gone through, sort of illustrated the concept of that cyclical process was created intentionally to give us the ability to properly go in and reflect on our experiences, as opposed to having one continuous stream with no, we'll call it downtime. It was a lot more difficult, apparently, for a being to go into an ascended state, because we were much more sort of like set into a habitual way, and this is the way I'm going to do things, and it wasn't as subject to change. Where if you are able to sort of like break that into cycles of process that allows you to go back and reflect on yourself, an individual or a soul is a lot more readily able to accept new information and new experiences. You're born into a new generation, you have all your old experiences, but now you're able to take another swing at it from a new perspective. And so if we lived immortally, we wouldn't have as rapid and accelerated learning curve as we would if we're able to sort of really take individual chunks of it at a time and really digest the goodness of it. And then from sort of the fear perspective of it, going through the ego integration and sort of like the denial aspect that we have sort of concerning fear, once you're looking at it from that immortal soul perspective, detached from the human incarnate spect. The main thing is, well, what am I trying to do with my soul mission and my main intention, my main purpose here, and living towards the main issues that my personal ego is dealing with and struggling with, and identifying those things. And as that happens, you accelerate that learning and growth curve even more so. And then death just becomes this transition of, you know, one state of being to the next, and ready to really like continue that continuous leveling up process. And so with the absence of fear, like fear being the understanding of, you know, keeping this mortal container alive in this carnation, and the absence of fear being complete love for the bigger process that says, I'm here to learn all these things, and once that time is done, I'm going to take all those experiences and transcend them into the next cycle, and keep that continuously getting closer to 5 process going, you know? That's the way I look at it.
I love that. I wanted to add too that, like, you know, what Kevin was saying earlier too, that, you know, like the ego or the personality perceives, you know, there's like the extremes on either side of you know, extreme suffering and extreme joy and whatnot. And I was kind of trying to liken that to something like relatable. I mean, Jesus comes to mind, but I want to get to him around this one other topic of actually looking at like a video game, because if you program or you write a story, even a movie, but a video game is fun because you're actively controlling the character. But if you write or create a game where there's a character who goes through this tremendous level of suffering to save, or even like the game is really hard and there's like lots of, you know, like you get killed a lot or whatever along the way, right? Like for the character, it really sucks. But on the outside perspective of the people making the game or writing the story, they're like, that level of suffering was necessary in order for them to grow and get to the point where they could go and do all of these things that they do. I'm the one that comes to mind is Assassin's Creed, because of, you know, we've been sort of enjoying that a little bit this past week, and in that, you know, there's this like the assassin like knife thing like requires that you cut off your finger, and that's like a suffering. But it like by doing it, you become, you know, this like more professional trained killer, you know? But not necessarily. You're like trying to save the world through secrecy and stuff. But still, just that idea though, it's just like very interesting of like, you know, like we can, if we're experiencing reality from our bodies, you know, like you go through a state of, you know, something horrible or whatever that happens, and it seems very traumatic in the moment. But kind of just going back to that idea from the outside perspective, you know, where pain isn't felt, and you can see, oh, look at that suffering is necessary to get to this point. You know, that's the renewal process in it as it's happening. And when it's happening, it's really intense and scary for the one who's enduring it. But on the other side, it's like you're liberated. And that kind of brings it around to Jesus, and why we're, you know, and how this is all relating, you know, with Easter, is that, you know, the amount of suffering that was endured by that man going through that process was, words can't even describe how agonizing that would have been, you know. And from going through that process of having the body just ripped to shreds, essentially, he comes out on the other side with a renewed, reborn, his light has reformed his body in immaculate splendor, you know, and it was just like a necessary purification of the destruction of the body.
I love, of course, talking about video games, since I'm in the video game industry. And just a little thought here, and simply that, yeah, it's very important to have a challenge. Obviously, you do have to suffer. You do have to have it, make it difficult in order to come back to the game, which is kind of interesting, because we say that we just want to relax and have a great life and just not have to do anything and not have to work anymore and sip Mai Tais by the ocean. but the actuality is that you want to have that challenge, and you want to wake up every day and tackle that challenge. And a video game is a perfect little microcosm of that, because your character is always going to suffer until you win the game. And then, but if it was easy to win the game, then you'd be like, oh, okay, well, that was fine. Any other games? But if it was really challenging and difficult and amazing feat that you managed to do it, then you feel a special type of reward, and it's self-gratification reward rather than a reward that the game might give you. And so we can certainly apply that to all of life. And I feel like that's a little off topic because it isn't necessarily about death, but I do find I've really been struggling because, of course, I've been in the video game industry for 21 years, and I've worked on all kinds of different games. I've worked on games for 4-year-olds, Dora the Explorer game, and I've also worked on Mortal Kombat 10. So, I mean, the spectrum is there, and it's pretty horrible, like what Mortal Kombat 10 was. It's like, oh my gosh, we're brutalizing each other, and the only way to sell the game is to make it more and more brutal than the previous versions. And so that's, been a problem for me in a way, especially as I've awakened more and more and looked at things and saying, why are we killing each other? Why do we have to die? Why do we have to kill, and not only just kill each other, but kill each other in horrible, grotesque ways? I don't even know. I've been really, confused by this, and I throw it back to the group and see what you guys have to say.
Well, my first thought in that whole nature kind of does go back to that spectrum that you had illustrated before, of given the infinite potential. It's as if this reality dimensionally was created with infinite potential. We could, with free will, choose how on that spectrum we wanted to experience ourselves. And sort of by doing so, it was all perfect in that nature, to allow for that learning and growth that would come from essentially like making that mistake. By discovering what is not God, we come to a much more profound understanding of what it really means to be an immortal and spiritual being. And the other concept that I think of at the same time is, again, from that unity consciousness perspective, we've gone through all of the different incarnations all at the same time. So it's essentially like anything you do to another person, you're really just doing to yourself in another form. So in that, we'd sort of collectively created an experience where we're just doing this to ourselves to really learn and understand the peace and balance that's now going to come from not doing those things anymore. Like we had to apparently really, as a human collective consciousness, chose to, we'll say, swing the other way in order to now come back around and go, oh wait, there's magnificence here, and it doesn't have to be this way. And now in this whole bigger process, where we will have been having had gone through all of this is going to be stronger and more united as a species, as a collective consciousness than we've ever been before, because we've realized what this separated by countries and races and genders and this whole division, separateness society that we live in right now. As we unify that, the joy that we're going to get from that will be, relative to the fact of we all have that history and that remembrance of when it wasn't, and so I feel like, again, from a larger perspective, looking at that, like this whole process, this massive cycle is really just a beautiful, how would Maha put it, research and development. Yeah.
Well, the whole time you were saying that, I had something that was just like, it was a wonderful addition to what you were describing. And then at the end, I just went, and I was thinking about I don't know, it did trail off, the train went away. Let's go to the chats.
I'll have something to say if there's
Yeah.
nothing being said right now. Yeah, so I'm being quite quiet at the moment. I've been adopting this policy of don't speak unless spoken to recently. But since we're talking about this death and rebirth cycles topic, there's something I wanted to say about how it kind of summarizing what we've spoke about earlier about the sort of ego and the pendulum swinging from both sides, which both Kevin and Aaron have just spoke about. So when we go into a sort of bad part of our personality, we don't want that. When we recognize it's a bad part, we don't want it. We want to shed it. We avoid pain and we strive for the goodness, the joy. And so I have found in my personal experience through time that I'm kind of killing off parts of my ego while adopting and integrating new parts which I feel are of benefit. And so I still remember all those dead parts, or pieces I've laid to rest. Yet I found that when speaking to people, people are obviously on different stages of their journey at different times. And so when I found someone who I resonate with, or I know that I have resonated with because I have felt and been through the similar situation in my life, I then resurrect that dead part of my ego. And I say, here, this got me through a time when I feel like it was what you're going through now. So please take this dead part of my soul, if you want to call it that, and put it to good use. It served me once, and let it serve whoever else again. So, and I found that through doing that, it opens up, even more capacity for input, I guess, and it helps. And so I feel like in that term of death, rebirth cycles, it's almost in a sense, if you look at the cycle on 2D plane, it's just a circle, but it's a spiral going upwards or downwards, whichever you're choosing. And so I found that by striving to go for the top, and you're leaving behind, if you're avoiding pain, you're leaving behind stuff, it becomes the weight that drags you down. But then by giving it to the people as you're spiraling upwards, you shed that weight, and you then become this funnel that you're taking in light, and as it channels through you, serves you, goes on to serve other people, if you so choose to channel it that way. So that's what I wanted to offer there. Thank you.
I really like the spiral thing too, because I just recently, well, first, that's just such a wonderful way to say it, because yes, the difference between a 2D image versus a 3D image, and there's growth in the spiral, but there was no growth in the circle. That you were just stuck there. And what's really cool is I just saw like a documentary little blip that showed, of course, the reality of our solar system. So our sun is in the center and everything's swirling around it. And so you look at that as just this 2D kind of circle. But of course, it's not. The sun is hurtling through space, and so are we. And so as we're going, we're actually creating this spiral pattern as we grow and go through the universe. So I equated that right away to what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost like the through the process of the growing, like what you were describing, Anthony, was like it's really like through the awareness of, or through the memories of everything that happened, it allows you to go to higher heights. But it's like if you forget, like we could use the example of like, let's say, you know, you ate, you know, a bunch of processed food or something that was really heavy or not really healthy, right? And it like made you feel really sick, and you're like, oh man, I gotta like clean up my body and my vibe. And then so you go through a process, you fast, you eat a lot of vegetables, and you feel really good, right? But it's like if you don't remember the way you felt when you ate that, you know, that addicting food or whatever it was, you know, the next time that it's presented to you, if you're not like mindful on that and be like, yeah, okay, I can just have tons of that, you know, and like that's and then, you know, you go back down, and then you kind of riding this wave up and down until you learn that lesson and transcend that to the level of like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm gonna not do that again, you know. And I think that's like, I was talking about that with my mom the other day actually, and that's like kind of a common thing that I think a lot of people are stuck on, because we do that very, you know, like because that stuff is so readily available, and for people who are kind of in that stage of, you know, they're not quite eating like raw organic vegan all the time or whatever, you know, like because in my mom's example or whatever, you know, she would go to work, and then the other teachers would like bring in cake, and she'd be like, oh geez, they brought in cake. It looks so good, you know. But then she'd come home and she'd be like, all right, I'm going to eat really well and do really well, and she'd do really well for a while, and then, you know, it would be presented in some other capacity, and then be you know, another temptation. And that's like that's a difficult thing to overcome, because it's not just the food or whatever it is, right? But it's also like the social environment of the community, of the family, and the people who are like, you know, all enjoying the thing together, and for you to stand up and be like, no, sorry, I'm not gonna, you know, it's that takes a lot of self-control, and a lot of, you know, you might even have to endure their judgment and be like, what, you don't want what kind of person are you doesn't turns down cake or whatever, you know, like that's difficult, you know. It can be so yeah, just the active, like that growth process, you know, it definitely requires that sacrifice, that necessary, that hanged man card we talked about before, to be able to like lay that old self to rest in order to truly move beyond it. And then one day in the future, it may all come back up again, and you'll have to like kind of face remembering the lessons that you once went through so long ago.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. Thank you. That's, you know, kind of the process I've been through very recently of the forgetting and having to remember what was once present. So that's, yeah, that really you know, hit the core for me.
Yeah, very, very well said there, Jordan. I really agree. It's like that whole, again, like going through those cycles and those processes of taking the time to, you know, remember why we had, you know, made the decision to stop a particular behavior or start a new behavior, through reflecting on whether or not we had a, you know, a positive or negative experience from our own actions in that way. One of the things that I know too from my own experience is I've gone through, we'll say, like periods of fasting and then periods of eating unhealthy, and it kind of like will flip back and forth between them, and I really do experience both sides of that. But then when I'm looking at it, one of the things is I can sort of like almost choose. It's like, okay, well, here's the thing that I know might hurt my body from a perspective of eating this. It's not necessarily the best thing in that nature. And then choosing to sort of like go through a pain experience intentionally because of the amount of joy that I'm going to get from eating it. I sort of like consciously make that choice to be like, you know what, I'm going to have this celebration and go through that, because it's all in that sort of like yin yang balance. Like there's going to be a positive and there's going to be a negative. And so kind of like holding that perspective, it's like, you know what, I'm going to eat the cake and I'm going to feel bad later. But while I'm feeling bad, I'm going to remember how good that cake was and keep it in balance, and just kind of like go back to that nice little middle ground. And then from that grounded perspective, it sort of like allows those cycles to happen a lot smoother, and there's a lot less of that rebound. Like I mean, in my own personal experience, I did just come back off of Jordan and I were fasting largely the past couple of weeks, actually. And, you know, like even right now, there's like a pizza in the fridge. And like, I'm feeling that and I'm going like, ooh, okay, this is really heavy in my body. I can feel this. And then right away that's that reminder of like, oh yeah, that's right. And that's why I was fasting. That's why I was going through all this, you know, like, and Jordan was saying really well, like there comes a time where you transcend the need to have to go through those experiences over again. But in that, there's kind of joy in being able to go through those experiences and to be able to like flow with it without having sway on it. It's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm feeling a little heavy. That's my karma from eating that pizza, but that pizza was good. I'm still in my middle ground, you know, but there's learning.
And then you could also do the yin and the yang of, okay, now I'm only going to eat healthy food, or I'm going to fast. And so that doesn't taste as good, and or, gosh, I feel hungry. But the reward, of course, is from the long-term or at least even the short-term benefits of eating fresh or eating, you know, raw or eating not that much or whatever. So yeah, so that balance still exists even in the other case.
Yeah.
Just, Aaron, you made me laugh so much. First on the topic of just the, like, you know, when you're like, I'm feeling sick, but like, man, that was so good. You're like, going back was like a really funny balance because you never get that perspective. And I thought that was just brilliant. But then I also was like, what? There's pizza in the fridge? When did that happen? I didn't know that. And it's probably better that I didn't know that. This was one of your like late night pizza binges, wasn't it? But yeah, no, I totally. And then like the balance I want to say of too, like this is that kind of where we're moving to as a species, is making the food that is as enjoyable as the pizza and doesn't feel really terrible inside, you know, like that's and that requires effort to do, and because it's easier or faster to, you know, in the systems that have been set up, you know, calling Domino's or Pizza Hut or whatever like that, their systems are set up to just slap together all of this stuff that they currently have ingredients, but are not like as made with love, you know, like the only way to really get that high vibing food is really to make it yourself or go to a more specialty place, which are generally more expensive. So like the system is really rigged against, you know, a convenience of ease of here's this thing immediately right here available for you without having to go through, you know, all of the process of creating it. And I kind of jumping back to something, Aaron, that you said maybe 10 minutes ago or something, you know, about like the us as a species moving through, you know, the stages that we're going through. We're still in the process of really having a lot of hard deaths of the old systems and the old way of doing things. And so like, you know, we're kind of looking at it from like, yeah, we'll, you know, look at it all and be like, wow, how ridiculous we were to have done all of that. But we don't even, like, the majority of human consciousness still is like, yeah, everything is, you know, like in the way that it is, which is like, yeah, it is. But it's not set up for the bountiful, joyous freedom and love of all of humanity. And so we still have to, like, those systems still have to die and be reborn for us to, as a collective, to be able to get there. But we're on our way.
Yeah, going back to that video game analogy, like talk about expert mode, final boss. It's like, okay, you have this crazy Illuminati controlled planet. You're given a life that you actually like bleed and feel pain, and now you have to go through this like working with other characters reality to build a new society where everyone gets to work together and actually bring peace to the planet in a real life incarnation. Like we'll call it Earth.
There is a video out of someone who's kind of summarized life as a game. I don't know if you've seen it.
I think I have actually.
That's hilarious. Yeah, he's like, oh, this game, there's like 7 billion players, you know, something like that. And the first few 30 levels are just really like training. It's really good. With that analogy.
Well, oh, wait. Oh, there I am. Just really quick on that same topic. I have a script for and it's like probably 12 or 13, 14 pages worth of script that I wrote like 2 years ago, which is like the manual of how to live life as a video game character, going from like kind of taking that video that you just mentioned and like fleshing it out into an actual like kind of instruction manual / like video game thing. That's like been on my like one of those, like, oh, one day we'll make that. So I'm just like putting the intention out to the world right now and putting this out of like one day we'll make that. And it was like, it'll be really, really fun. Probably a good like live action adaptation or live action supplement to like Spirit Science and stuff like that. Kevin, you'll have to be a part of it too, because you're a video maker.
I would love to, and I've had these sort of thoughts as well. Of course, you can't help but not have them. Yeah, it is too perfect, and it does feel like we did sign up and say, okay, there's all these video games out there. There's Palladia, and there's this one, and then there's Earth. Oh man, do I really want to play Earth? Man, that one's tough. Like, couldn't we play a different one? Like, what? Okay, fine, we'll go ahead and do Earth. Oh my gosh, now I got to pick a character. Oh geez, this is hard. Oh man, there's a lot of suffering. Like, do I want to suffer? Oh man. So it's great. I love the idea of like really thinking through that whole thing. And I'm gonna, like, believe it or not, I'm gonna move us away from the video game thing, because I have another kind of thought that really important kind of moment for me, because I was very much as I've said before, I was very much a scientist who didn't believe in any of the spiritual anythings, and a capitalist and all that. And so 3 or 4 years ago, my transformation occurred because I had an ayahuasca experience, and during that experience, I remember asking Aya. I just got to talk to Aya for like 45 minutes. It was a very light dose, and so I just got to sit and talk to her and ask her lots of questions, and so that she was just this amazing, wise entity that just could answer anything that I asked. And the one question that I think is relevant to today's topic is, I asked, is there such a thing as past lives and reincarnation? Because I didn't really believe it at the time. I believed in the science explanation, which is, of course, you're born, you get to have a life, and then you die, and you're gone forever, which obviously has a lot to do with the way that our society is right now. But anyway, so I asked the question, does that exist? And I was immediately shown imagery of factory farms, and I was looking at cows being milked to death, and pigs being slaughtered, and all the horror that it is happening there. And she didn't even have to say a word. I just knew, of course, oh, so I get to be those things too. And if you need any inspiration to stop doing that, that's all you need. And imagine what our society would be like if everyone just believed that, if everyone accepted the fact that, oh gosh, when we die, we get to be reborn again, and maybe we're going to be a cow that's going to be in this torture, or maybe we're going to be the Palestinians or whatever. Like, so if we looked at it in that way, then we would really change things really fast. So I hope that realization can fall on our society, so that we can do the right thing for each other.
No, pray for that. Oh, yeah, please. Oh no, I was gonna say thank you. You never think about it from the perspective of like, for the person who made the decision to go and like milk the cows to death, being reborn as a cow and getting milked to death by his own system. But that would be just cosmic karma at its finest, honestly. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. Like, there's a movie called Powder. Has anyone here heard of it? You got a couple thumbs up there? No? In Powder, it's kind of about this like incredibly gifted psychic child who everybody picks on and makes fun of because he looks different than everybody else. He's kind of an albino, no hair. But he's tremendously powerful. And in one part of the movie, there's these hunters This guy is like a dad and like his kids or whatever, and Powder's there, and they're going out and they like shoot a deer, and the deer is like lying on the ground, like suffering and like in the dying process, and the hunter was just like, haha, I'm such a badass, look at me, I killed the deer. And Powder like reaches over and like touches the deer and then grabs the guy, and instantaneously the hunter, the man, just experiences directly what the deer is feeling in that moment, and he goes into like an agonizing shock of like, holy crap, and like the kid Powder won't let him go. And it's such a moving scene, because after that the guy is just changed, really upset, but changed. And so like, to really, that kind of, you know, the last call that we did was really about empathy, and kind of, I guess, bringing that concept here is to really understand what someone else is feeling on a deep level, you know, and to feel them just builds a lot of connection between all of us. And we need to be able to have that level of empathy to really tap in with each other, to know what's going on, in order to, you know, to bridge those gaps and expand the connections.
Yeah, and I even kind of hate to say this, but we all get to be the cows that are milked to death, and so we all, you know, and the whales that eat all the plastic and die and all that. So it's not just the one who did the deed, but it's all of us, and so we all have to work together to solve those problems. And so by us just ignoring them, we're essentially just as bad as the people who did them, kind of concept, if we look at it in that way. And so, yeah, I can't solve all the plastic in the ocean, and I can't get rid of all the factory farming practices that are going on. But, you know, the more people that want that gone, the more chance it will be corrected. So again, that's the hope and the wish, is that we just come to the realization, either through that empathy or, again, the death and rebirth concept. If we all believed that we would come back and suffer, we would go, well, why would I do that to myself? We need to change some things.
Right. We need like and we really need a catalyst to spark that human drive out of suffering into doing something about it, right? Like, generally people only act when they're in such amount of suffering that they have to, you know, like, you don't go out of your way to try and heal your body unless your body starts failing you, you know, is generally the way that humankind operates. So it's like, we really need that as a global level. And even still, with like, you know, global warming and all of this, you know, like the planet's heating up, the ice caps are melting, there's places on the earth that are starting to really experience tremendous levels of suffering because of it. But there's still enough people in comfort themselves personally that there's not, you know, a widespread action of, we have to do something about this. And I think this is where kind of, you know, I'm going to just throw this out here as like a thought, and you just, you know, for everyone watching and everything, just, you know, take this however you take it, you know, as an experience. But this is, because this is just information. But there was it was actually the guy, what was his name? I forget his name. It was one of Hitler's top scientists, who on his deathbed described the plan for bringing humanity together and uniting like under a one world government. And he said that there were three main tiers, right? First, there was going to be like the communists, and there was going to be terrorists, and then there was going to be aliens. And there was these three levels were going to basically inspire different levels of war that would facilitate humanity reaching different points of really connection with each other, and bringing together the different, I guess, sections of the world social structures into bigger and bigger, you know, like unified bodies. Because you had, you know, going through the different ages or whatever, you know, World War I and Werner von Braun, Sage Studios just said, yes, thank you. That was the name for anybody who wants to look it up. But the different, like, you know, the Cold War and the Cold War and the communists and everything like that caused, that was like a level that caused certain, you know, allied or different world powers to unite together to fight the common enemy, which, you know, was each other. And then there was World War II, which was actually before that, and they had the similar kind of effect. Now we have terrorists, and the whole world's getting really afraid and messed up on the whole, like, there's terrorists, there's people with bombs and everything like that, and there's this whole thing with, you know, North Korea and Russia, and like that's kind of the new building up to like a World War III. But in the large scope of things, if you think about it, like that's still people fighting people. And there's this sort of talk about a hoaxed alien attack of some kind that really inspires all of mankind to go, oh snap, we're all together on this planet, and now there's someone else. It does, at this point, our problems are, you know, like Russia fighting the US or whatever, like isn't even a factor, considering there's aliens with a higher ability to come and destroy us all. We have to work together in order to stop this threat. And it uses like fear and suffering and chaos and pain in order to inspire people to actually like get off their butts and act and do something, right? And like fend off this threat, whether it's actually a legitimate threat or not, because there's this whole thing, you know, going into, well, it's not real. It's a planned, facilitated attack to facilitate people's coming together, right? And, you know, you kind of have to just weigh that against the, you know, like, well, one world government, this and that or whatever. You probably at some point take out the government because people just get it. But that's the point we're trying to get to. I don't know if we're right there yet in this moment. But it's quite an interesting thought, you know, to get into that, like, you know, if and when, if this is one of those things that takes place in this way, and what that's supposed to look like, you know, how will we come out after it? Because it's also like, you know, whenever there's a big crazy war, there's also all these new technologies that come out afterwards. So ideally, if we have a hoaxed attack with some aliens, then afterwards we'll have like flying cars and all of the fun stuff, space travel that we never did before. But in the meantime, it's like we have to traverse this crazy level of suffering and intense, you know, global chaos in order to reach that point. It'd be nice to not have to do that, but who knows, you know? I mean, there's a lot going on beyond the scope of just what any, as kind of, you know, I think it was Kevin was saying, was any one individual can do. It's like we all have to be working together to make a change.
Yeah, I just feel like I've heard, you know, many prophecies of, you know, like that specific extraterrestrial influence coming in and causing a very large shift. But I too feel like whether that presence comes down with a warring intention, or whether it comes as just these bearers of great information and gifts, and we receive them joyously and in celebration of our, you know, like newfound extraterrestrial family members, you know what I mean? Like, whether that's a really joyous experience or a terrifying experience, I think is going to be a reflection of our own personal internal state. Like, I feel like a lot of those higher beings of consciousness and awareness that are like looking down on Earth as a playground essentially says, you know, like we get to be the ones who make that decision. And by our own action, by our ability to work with each other here and now, we'll sort of determine whether or not that presence comes down in support of that, or whether it comes down in reflection of who we are, with that same degree of how we're treating each other being the lesson that we've chosen to learn and experience. And so it kind of still like puts us back in the driver's seat of that. And I mean, like, again, I've heard people talk about that from both sides of the perspective, and I'm just, you know, interested to see how it happens, because I've felt beings out there, but I feel like most of the time when we're in communication with them, it's just like our level of like asking the right questions just isn't there yet, you know? And so I feel like we as a species have some growing to do in order to be able to, you know, really handle that level of technology with the grace and honor that would be required. Because, you know, like with that level of influence in our society, like we might be able to have flying cars, but if one of those engines could like make a device that would make an atom bomb look like, you know, one of those, like a bottle rocket or something like that, like we're not ready for that as a society yet. And so like that has to be fixed first. And I feel like that's sort of where we're going.
Very well said. Very true. Yeah. Anthony.
Yeah, I wanted to say something that I had been hearing, and it seems to make sense to me anyway, is that, you know, this is our sphere, this is our home, and we are of this earth. We have the collective consciousness that encapsulates it and protects it. And if just like with you know, atoms bonded together to make an object, if something wants to penetrate that, it has to do so with great force, or with you know, with consciousness accepting it, you know, letting it inside. And so this, you know, with what you spoke about, Jordan, this plan of the of world leadership organizing war and orchestrating it around an event such as an extraterrestrial visit, it would come to us in a way of suggestive behavior, whereby we, you know, a lot of people on the earth now believe in extraterrestrials and will it, almost want it to happen now. And so if it's guided shrewdly into war, that can be done, and it can be done with consensual thought, at least by the human race. And so if we expect war, and we have that in hand, the expectation of war with the intention of wanting extraterrestrial contact, there's something that people can use to fulfill a service to self agenda. And so, you know, I wanted to just put a message across that anything that we think can happen that's bad, or that's you know, going to be like a war, an attack, as such, like an extraterrestrial visit that's an attack, would not happen without our, you know, at least subconscious consent. And so we can avoid that, and we can similarly with the growth that comes from that, the technology and the evolution of our thinking that comes from that. All that stuff is possible now. I mean, we know that there are, you know, black ops projects, and there are these little snippets of science that have sort of come out through the woodworks now and then. So, and just like you said, Aaron, we have this this sort of, we're not ready for this sort of stuff. And you know, if we had this bombarding of technology, we probably would you know, have another World War III sort of thing. But again, it doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't need to be. Oh, someone's just joined.
Hey.
Hello, Chris. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So yeah, I just wanted to put the message across that, you know, I just didn't want to feel like, I felt a bit like doom and gloom for some reason. Like, I know that wasn't your intention, Jordan, but I you know, I always feel that with messages that come across about war and you know, this sort of suffering, or prophecies of suffering anyway, that they're always completely avoidable, and you know, you could take any horrible bad thing and have it switched, polarized to the other side, or in balance.
Right. Well, it's kind of like, you know, that memories thing we were talking about before, because ideally, you know, back in the day, they said World War II was the war to end all wars, but then there was more wars, so it didn't end them all, right? And so just on that conversation of like, if everybody woke up and just got it, and got that we were all one and one family, and gonna figure it out and connect and communicate and take that route, then that would end all wars, because we'd all just, you know, get it. But you know, if that's not the path that mankind chooses to take, if there is another war that is a global catastrophe of crazy levels of whatever, you know, like, then it really comes down to, well, now we have the internet, now we have, you know, maybe a little bit more ability to remember what happened so that it doesn't happen again, you know, because back then we didn't have the internet, and then America got all kind of bloated a little bit, and then it just, the whole thing just it's not entirely united yet. We as a species are definitely not united yet. So, but I want to take a second to turn it over to Priscilla. Welcome so much. Thank you so much for joining. Today we're talking about the renewal process, and we would love to hear anything you have on that subject.
Well, yes, synchronicities, right? So I actually have been going through this path right now, and to internalize like all the knowledge that I have been acquiring recently, and it's definitely giving me a better outcome of how I should behave. Like, why am I here for? It's just everything starts to become a little bit more clear, and I don't know. It's just what I can find. Because I was getting a little bit frustrated at some point because of society, right? Like it's hard to see other people sharing the same desire that you have of changing, or of being part of everything, nature and respect for life. So I was getting frustrated with that. But I just come to realize that the fact that I am here right now, immersed in this society, it means that I need to create this balance within me, so I can create balance outside as well. So that's something that, like, I was a little bit in a fight with myself about it, and right now, like, seeing it on a different light, it just makes everything different, much different, and I feel a little bit better. I still feel a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. I'm actually right now working, so but I'm giving myself time also to have this a little bit of space and say hi to all of you guys. And yeah, I'm excited about it and see what else life has for me. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear your thoughts.
No, Anthony, the floor is yours.
I was going to say, I just wanted to stop in and say thank you, because it was quite silent. But if you want to say something, carry on.
Yeah, no, my only comment too is just thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. Like, I want to say too, like, we all carry a unique perspective, and being able to share, what we're going through and what we're learning and how we're getting through our experiences, and what those little golden nuggets that take away, like, the light from our experiences, and be able to, like, bring that out there so that we can look at some of these topics that we're all going through and find that deeper lesson in that light, and then share that experience with others, so that we don't have to keep repeating those same mistakes over and over. And that kind of goes right back to that whole rebirth process of like, we have these experiences, they come, we learn from them, and then we're, like, born anew with this information, this experience. And I want to actually relate it to a principle that I learned while studying some psychology while my sister was going through getting her degree there. And one of the courses that her and I were kind of, like, studying through together was this, like, levels of, I think they call them schemas, but it was like a perspective that we see reality through. And then through experience, whether that's a good experience or a bad experience, or like a meditative, reflective experience, or like going to school and learning something new, there is some kind of growth process that happens. And that schema goes from one state of awareness to suddenly there's this catalytic change. And now you're on a new state of awareness. And it's sort of like that stair-step evolution that was talked about in the Ancient Human History movie, where it's like, we're going on and out of way and things are the way they are, and then there's this catalytic realization that bumps it now to a new way of viewing reality. And we can't actually go back almost in that way of like looking at where we were before. Once you have a realization, it's very difficult to sort of like forget how object permanence works, you know, or like you can't, once you know, you can't unknow. But again, like that's all sort of like part of that process where I kind of do actually believe there is that forgetting state, so that we have, you know, that joy of the remembrance. And there is a bigger thing going there. But the way the psychology sort of looked at it was this a level of, you know, you are at one way, and then you have an experience, and now you're at another level, and it keeps going and it keeps building. And it's sort of fun to just look at our like day to day of like every day is a level of awareness, and you can now take that and look at those experiences, reflect on them, and then try and expand your awareness and hit the next level, and hit the next year, and hit the next cycle, you know, and keep that going.
I have something that flows from that. And is anyone familiar with the story of Sisyphus? It's in Greek mythology, where gods condemned Sisyphus, not syphilis, not the STD syphilis, Sisyphus. Sisyphus is, in Greek mythology, a man who was punished to forever roll a heavy boulder up a hill, only to have it roll down to the bottom again. And that was the turmoil we went through, pushing this heavy rock, and you have to start from the beginning again. And that's kind of, I guess, bringing together a few things we've spoken about, and this whole thing of rising and falling in suffering and joy. And you know, we have time to press along and space to move through, but we have this repeating, which, you know, as you look at the sine wave, you can interpret that as a cycle as well. You know, and if we're struggling to get to the top, and we fall back down, and we see that as pain and suffering because we are no longer in that good zone, we're constantly going up and down. And just as it's a struggle to climb up the hill, when we go up and down a few times, we realize if this is what we're going to do for all eternity, we don't need to struggle. Why do we have to struggle about it? You know, why not go halfway and, you know, play a game of checkers or have a cup of tea before you carry on again and take a break? So, you know, what changes then is that inner resistance to the task at hand. You know, it's no longer this dubious task of pushing a boulder up a hill. You know, you're playfully getting it up the hill, and whee, it goes down again. You know, all of it becomes a joyous thing. And then, because the inner resistance has left us, the cycle becomes faster and closer together. The frequency becomes quicker until it becomes what appears to be just a solid block line. And what's the only thing that can happen then is that this whole line, on a new level and a new realm of possibility, moves. And so you can see that in many different ways. You know, we as individuals are all on our own different karmic cycles. And when we start to blend and move together, then we start to unite our karmic cycles, so to speak. And I can kind of get the feeling of that across. You know, if anyone's had plant-based medicine, which I know everyone here has, you get that body feeling, and you know the feeling of the chakras aligning, whereby you feel this swaying, but you're not actually moving, and you feel it's kind of become so drastic, and then it almost envelops and becomes wider and starts to move again. And that's kind of the physical sensation I'm summarizing with that sine wave movement and the Sisyphus going up the hill. Does that kind of work? Does that make sense? Good. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to add that in. I felt that was something that continued on from what you said, Aaron. And if anyone wants to pick up the thread.
Totally. I mean, the only thing that I just saw like really prominently was making a fun little After Effects animation of a sine wave that just starts speeding up and becomes a solid line, and then it zooms out and that thing starts going, and it like creates this infinite repeating, zooming out and expanding thing. I'll be like, that probably wouldn't be too hard for me to animate. Like, that's like on my list now, things I'm going to do.
That's awesome.
Go for it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, there was something earlier that we were talking about. I think Jordan might have been talking about it, but the pursuit of joy, or the pursuit of positive emotions and positive energy, as opposed and the avoidance of negative. And one thing that let's say that today, for the rest of today, the four of us, all we're going to do is feel amazing positive energy, right? We are going to make this decision, and we're going to make it happen. By the end of the day, we'll say we did it. It was an amazing day. I can't, this is awesome. I'm ready to go to sleep. And the next morning you're going to wake up and you're going to go, gosh, today doesn't feel quite as cool, because man, I don't know if I have the energy to do that again. And not only that, in order for me to, I kind of got used to how good that felt. So in order for me to feel even better than I did yesterday, I have to like make it even more amazing of a day. And so eventually you're just going to run out of something in order to experience better and better and better every day. So it's actually really nice that we get an opportunity to feel crappy. Then it's a lot easier to feel a little bit better after that.
I love that. That's really good. It reminds me of, and I probably was written in the Flower of Life books, actually. It came from Jim Below, who wrote that it's the difference between creating from the heart versus creating from the brain. Because if you're creating from the brain, you're creating dualistically, and if you're like making the decision, I'm going to feel good, like very mentally that you're doing this, then you're automatically setting the stage for some negative energy to come and balance that out. But creating from the heart is a singular experience, and it doesn't come in the form of like, I'm going to decide to do a thing. It's just is, and it comes through in the actions and through the natural process of living your life authentically. And so then by like, if you create in that way, then joy or a peaceful neutrality or awareness of suffering or all of these different things just happen very, very naturally. And it's not like you're trying to feel joy, and you can like breathe that sort of that inner peace or that I almost want to say joyous state into any particular moment, but it has to happen naturally through the will of spirit, because it's when you're in that centered heart place that's when spirit is the most present moving through you.
I love how there's like these rainbow fractals moving across your screen, Jordan. There's a prism or something. It must be a crystal.
It fully comes and goes with the sun. It's starting to appear again because there's a lot of clouds moving. But
there was one literally on your third eye at one point when you're talking.
See if I could like get it. No. But yeah, there's just like a little crystal prism over on the windowsill, and it's like this is actually the rainbow hour. I call it the rainbow hour because every day when it's sunny at this point during the day, I'll have rainbows like just streaking across my room and my office room, and it's just so nice. The only challenge I have with it is that it faces away from, like, my desk faces away from it, so I don't often like get to see it, but I get to like bask in it, so it's really nice. It's on my throat right now. Yeah, it's really nice. So we've been on for an hour and 15 minutes. How's everybody doing so far?
Very good. Having a nice relaxed evening here in Lithuania.
It was fun how Priscilla kind of like popped in, said a little piece, popped out.
She was at work, I think. Possibly.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I did pull a card right in the middle of the call earlier. Here's this one. Couldn't get any better than that.
That's brilliant.
We can probably do another one too as this call comes to a close. I also have a piece I'm excited to read for our closing meditation. I've got it prepared for this one, so that'll be fun. But yeah, if there's any other thoughts, then we could kind of go into the closing ceremonies of our call.
Yeah, my only final thought would just be giving love and appreciation for sort of like the joy of going through these cycles, because the whole thing, again, from that perspective, is just, it's a gift to be able to go through all this, really, and looking at it from that way and just resonating with, like this whole thing is immaculate, and then taking time to really respect those around us and appreciate family and reconnection with all this stuff, going through these cycles together, bringing that community. It's just a beautiful thing.
Totally. That's a really good family time too, like with the Easter holiday and everything like that. And even if you're not celebrating, the holiday, using the weekend to spend time with family is always good. Okay.
Take it away, Jared.
Taking it away. You'll really enjoy this. I'm just going to do the first part of this because it's really long, but I'm certain you'll really enjoy this. So, yeah, everybody, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Continue to breathe and breathe deeper with every breath. Relax into your body. And now, open your mind. Let your consciousness flow wherever it chooses to as you listen. We stand at the threshold of a great dawning. Something deep within life is changing. An era is ending, and at the very core of creation, something new is being born. We are awakening from a long collective sleep, an in vitro dreaming deep within the womb of our Mother Earth. Now is the time of a great shifting of cosmic wheels, which will result in the reformation of our Earth and trigger a radical shift in consciousness. A galactic tidal wave of light is descending upon the Earth, activating the highest potential, raising the frequency. Reality is being reformed, redefined. The activation of new neural pathways will trigger new perceptions, new information, new impulses, and a recalibration of DNA. Open yourself to these higher dimensional frequencies. Let go. Love each other in these coming times. Be kind to each other. Gather in community. Share yourself. Live your dream. Live your heart. Open. Open yourself. Be prepared for the challenges to come, the dark times of chaos and upheaval. We will experience a dynamic recalibration of electromagnetic fields and Earth systems on a global scale. Stay present. Stay calm and centered. Try not to judge what is happening. Surrender to the process. Hold firm in the knowledge of what is being birthed. The process of birthing is an undertaking, an arduous task, often fraught with intensity. Stay in the heart. Beloved family and friends, too shall pass, and is a necessary purification, a great purge of all that is not in resonance with what is being born within us. All will be redeemed and reformed in miraculous ways. Chaos will become peace, and sorrow will become joy. Trust. Trust with love. as you continue to breathe, allowing these new frequencies to enter into yourself and raise your vibration. Expand out, remembering your divine connection to all that is. Open yourself to love, loving your neighbor, loving your brothers and sisters, loving all of mankind. And when you're ready to give this love to everyone around you, open your eyes and embark on your journey through this miraculous holiday and into the weeks to come. Namaste. So if I shuffle some cards here.
That was like proposed.
Can we do everybody draws a card again?
Sure.
What was it you said?
The thing you were reading from, like that was the track that we had heard at Renewal. Like
That was Metamorphosis by Darpan. And actually the song that I sung a little bit of at the beginning was another track by Darpan. I think it was Love Light. But it might have been a different one. I don't remember. Either way, it was on my mind and my heart. Darpan is amazing for anybody who is interested in some very uplifting music. Check out Darpan. I believe it's on like Spotify and iTunes as well. So I'm going to draw a card here. We got the Princess of Wands. She's very enthusiastic. Let's see if we can get that to unfocus. Focus proper? No, maybe?
That's so crazy. I drew that card. That's the only card I've actually drawn from the Patch Tarot deck yet, because I've only got my hands on it a few weeks ago, and I had to leave to come here shortly after, and that was the only time I got the Princess of Wands.
Wow, that's delightful.
Just a crazy synchronicity.
Do you want to speak to it at all? Do you know anything about it?
I read through the brief description you outlined in the Patch Tarot book, and to me, my question at the time, it meant a lot, and perhaps this is a reminder of that. You know, since we've been talking about remembering and forgetting, I think that's what it's pointing to. It's pointing to go back and remember that lesson, because I've forgotten it.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting too, because as I'm looking at it, you know, you'll see if we can get it to focus. If not, you might have to go to patchtarot.com and find it. But it's this character who's actually igniting herself. She's holding her flaming wand to the fire, or to the wood, and igniting it as, oh, we had it for a moment there. I think it was out of focus. Either way, she ignites herself, sending herself up into an inferno, but giving birth to herself at the same time. So it's almost one of those, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Like, she, you know, did like, she is the fire that lights herself, the enthusiasm. And as this, of course, relates with the, this is a Wands card, it's very related to the spiritual will and the inspiration that comes from within. But then the earth aspect, the princess, the earth aspect of it is that physical, grounded action that you take that inspires the spiritual will, and that's how they relate together with the kind of that yin and the yang there. They're two, the fire and the earth are very polar elements from each other, but in that they share a very interesting connection. So yeah, this is one of those, she's dying and being born at the same time. She's burning up, and you know, once the wood has burned, once the fuel has burned up. There's nothing, you need more fuel to keep the fire going. But she's both the fuel and the fire itself, perpetually creating the renewal cycle of lighting herself and burning herself up.
Like, that's like the perfect card to summarize this all.
I would say so, yeah.
The other thing is, on my computer, I drew the way. So it's like, well, there you go. That's the way to do it.
Hold on, again? Didn't you get that one last week too?
Apparently, we're on the right path.
That's such a good one too. Oh man. I mean, it's hard not to have a good one though. Like, at least I'm like, I really enjoy like pulling a card, or I just got another one. There's no bad cards. Except cruelty. But if we got that, we'd be like, well, let's face the seriousness of reality we've got here, you know? Oh no, Summer said you pulled truth last week. So last week you pulled truth, and this week you pulled the way, which is also very in alignment with what we've got, you know, this whole Easter thing going on. You've got the light, the truth, the way, and the all. Yeah.
All right. Love. Blessings.
So much love. Thank you, brothers, for joining us today. This has been absolutely delightful.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. And for everybody in the chat, I look down here because my little chat window's down there. But for everybody in the chat who's watching, thank you so much for joining and writing in, and all of the messages and conversations in there were really fun to read. So thank you again, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Peace, love.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.